Hey there, Frank Philosophy here. What things are worth doing? That's the question. You might ask yourself a version of this question on the daily. What should I do today? How should I spend my time? Or you might ask yourself this question in a more general sense. What sorts of things should I spend the majority of my time doing? What sorts of things should I center my life around? What sorts of activities do I think are worthy of spending a majority, or at least a significant portion of my time, my brief time on this planet, pursuing? It's a question that many philosophers have thought about for thousands of years in all sorts of different cultures and contexts. And I just want to give you a brief version of one answer that I've learned about recently that I think is pretty insightful. It comes from a paper by Kieran Setiya called The Midlife Crisis. And if you'd like to see a full discussion of that paper and a full read-through, you can check out my video on the Midlife Crisis paper, where I read through it line by line and explain it and go through all the arguments. And it's great fun and highly enlightening, I think. But at any rate, here is the quick version of what I take to be some of the main takeaways from that argument. Okay, so very often we find ourselves in what we might call crises of meaning, where we feel like the things that we're doing aren't very meaningful and they aren't very worth doing, right? So maybe we might find ourselves after playing a video game for hours and hours and hours deciding that, well, this might not be worth my time. The sort of value that I derive from spending the time playing the game is not the sort of value that's going to bring meaning to my life overall, right? Now that's one kind of crisis. Another kind of crisis, which is more like what Kieran Setiya is talking about when he talks about the midlife crisis, is when we actually do things that should be satisfying to us, that seem worthy, right? Where they are activities that on pretty basic evaluative premises seem like they're good things to be pursuing. Starting a family, getting that job, hitting some financial milestone, buying the car, or whatever it might be. And even when we do those things that seem like they're more worthy than, sex, drugs, and video games, they might not satisfy us. They might not bring us meaning. And that's the sort of problem that Setiya talks about in the midlife crisis, where we can have a string of successes in life, a string of satisfying activities that we've done that would normally, that you might think would make life worth living, but it doesn't. It still leaves us empty, right? Life can feel like, as Albert Hubbard famously stated, it can just feel like one damn thing after another. So what do we do, right? Even if life is one damn thing after another, even if it's successful or unsuccessful, it's still just one damn thing after another. So what do we do? What should we do? How should we spend our time? What is worth doing that won't leave us feeling like life is just one damn thing after another? So there's a couple options that have been pursued throughout the philosophical tradition, East and West. We'll look at one famous example from Aristotle, which concerns the kind of value that you can get from different sorts of activities. And there are activities that fall under three different kinds of values that Aristotle discusses. So you can do an activity or pursue something that has derivative value, meaning that the thing is valuable because of something else. So wealth, for example, trying to gain a lot of money. Money itself only has derivative value because it's valuable only because of what it can do for you, right? It's valuable only because of what it can buy. The money itself doesn't really have any value. It's only valuable because of the things that it can purchase, right? The things that it represents, right? It's not intrinsically valuable. And that's the second kind of value, something that's valuable in itself. And for Aristotle, the only thing that really fits this bill is knowledge, right? The idea of contemplating life and getting at the truth, right? Pursuing the truth and arriving at the truth is valuable for its own sake. So this idea of knowledge for knowledge's sake is very important in the Greek philosophical tradition, and Aristotle thinks that it's the only thing that has intrinsic value, that's valuable only for its own sake, not for the sake of something else. And then you have activities or things that are a combination of these two. The one most discussed in Aristotle being moral virtue, right? The cultivation of virtue, which is derivative in the sense that it relies upon the fact that you need to, solve problems in order to cultivate one's virtue, right? It relies on the fact that you've successfully, helped somebody in need or saved someone's life. Doing either of those things requires something else to have happened, right? It requires somebody to be suffering, somebody to need your help. But it's also a product of the exercise of reason, which is virtuous and valuable in itself. So it's a combination of those two things, right? Acting virtuously, cultivating oneself, being moral. But Aristotle thinks that the best thing to do is just sit and think about life, really, to pursue contemplation of the truth, right? That's really the best we can do, because the highest goods are pursued for their own sake. They're not pursued for the sake of something else, right? Because money is only pursued because of the things it can buy, it's not as good of a value to pursue compared to something like knowledge, which is valuable in its own right. So that's Aristotle's answer to what things are most worth doing. Well, it's something that's intrinsically valuable, something that's valuable non-derivatively, and the only thing that fits that bill absolutely is the pursuit of knowledge. Okay, so Setiya argues against this in the Midlife Crisis, and he does it by a pretty clever and deceptively simple counterexample. He says, okay, fine. Suppose you spend your life pursuing knowledge for its own sake. Suppose you're a scientist, and all you care about is furthering knowledge, solving problems, and things like that. Could you still find life unsatisfying? And the answer is yes. Of course you could. Right? You could think, you could spend your whole life just doing philosophy like Aristotle and wondering, well, isn't this just one damn thing after another? Am I just solving one problem after another? And if so, might that, wear you down a bit? And that's the problem. So if it doesn't matter the kind of good, whether it's derivative or non-derivative, then how can we identify the sort of activity that's not going to leave us feeling unsatisfied? And Setiya's solution relies on this distinction between telic and atelic activities. And he thinks that understanding this distinction and reevaluating our relationship with these kind of activities is going to lead us to a more satisfying life. So telic activities have a natural endpoint. Right? So it's a kind of activity where it has a point at which it is done. You've written the paper. You've created the video. You've graduated from college. You've beat the game. You've performed the concert. Right? Those activities have a natural endpoint where you can complete them and be done, check them off the list, and move on. Atelic activities are not like this. They have no natural endpoint. They begin when you begin them, and they end when you end them. So going for a walk, studying philosophy, playing a game, right? All of these things you do successfully purely by virtue of doing them at all. And they only end when you stop doing them. They are successful as long as you're actually doing them. Right? You are succeeding in going for a walk so long as you're just going for a walk. Right? And you're studying philosophy successfully if you're studying it at all. There's no sense in which you can complete going for a walk. There's no natural end point to going for a walk. The only end point for going for a walk is that which you determine when you stop walking, right? When you turn off the game, when you stop studying. And Setiya's point is that, well, a lot of us think of life in terms of one telic activity after another, right? Just checking things off the list, succeeding in one discrete task after another. We got to get the job, and then we got to get the next job, and then we got to, get X amount of money, and then we got to get the next amount of money. Then we got to buy the house, then we got to buy the second house, then we got to buy the bigger house, then we got to buy the car, then we got to have a kid, then we got to have another kid. And it just becomes one damn thing after another. And this is exhausting, and it leads to the crisis of meaning that Setiya characterizes in terms of the midlife crisis. So the suggestion is to focus instead on atelic activities whose value comes from simply doing them. So do more of those. That's the advice. And within the context of telic activities, because we can't avoid them, right? We have to complete tasks. We have to do stuff that has natural endpoints. We should shift our perspective to view telic activities atelically and value the activity inherent in doing the telic activity as a thing worth valuing in itself. So, for example, walking the dogs is a telic activity in the sense that it has a beginning, middle, and end. Right? I take out the dogs, they do their business, we walk around, and then I bring them home. But instead of focusing on that element, we should focus instead on the fact that we are going for a walk. Right? So it's about shifting our perspective. So walk the dogs so that you can go for a walk. Right? Or read the book, right, which has a natural endpoint because you come to the end of a book. But just so that you can engage in reading, right? Find joy in the reading itself. Find joy in the walking itself, rather than the fact that it is part of some activity that has a beginning, middle, and end. So find the joy in things without natural success conditions. Right? Just do more activities that are typically conceived of without natural endpoints. And within the context of activities with natural endpoints, enjoy those without regard for their success conditions. Right? Walk the dogs just so that you can go for a walk. Right? Drive to pick up the kids just so you get to go for a drive. Things like that. Now, is that the answer to the meaning of life? It seems a little easy, but it's definitely knocking on the door of something I think profound and pretty good advice. Pretty good advice. So with that, I will leave you to think more and maybe check out my full video on the midlife crisis as presented by Kieran Setiya, where he goes through this argument, and I go through the argument that he gives in great detail. But in the meantime, I'm going to go walk my dogs. Have a great day.